working late hours and other things, you are sacrificing the social side of things, right? You are maybe not talking to your parents every single day, which they may mind sometimes. You may not be going out with your friends every weekend, which they may mind as well. So I think because of that, I've also lost quite a few friends along the way.
Ritika Saraswat, a true force of change, founded a remarkable non-profit organization called Redefined, dedicated to improving the lives of individuals from non-traditional backgrounds.
Someone had said that, it's important to realize you're not the main character in everyone's story. And I think that's again very powerful, right? Just focus on yourself because no one else is really looking at you.
Through Redefined, Ritika has made a profound impact, positively influencing the lives of over 20,000 people across 4 countries.
Self-doubt comes from the fact, hey, if I mess up today, will the other person not give me a job? Hey, if I mess up today, am I embarrassing myself and that other person won't want to be friends with me? It's all based on what we think others think of us.
Before we let the stories of the past shape your future, it would mean the world to me if you could follow us or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us. Enjoy the conversation.
So, without any further ado, Brandon, let the stories of the past
shape your future on the
Quoting Life podcast.
The first questions we typically ask our guests tend to do with their background and how that's impacted their journey today. And what I'm asking you is not necessarily to give me your journey as a whole, but more so those specific moments growing up that impact your decisions today and who you are. I know that you're someone who's really involved with impact, and I'm just curious to see, if I looked into your childhood, went back in time, would I find any moments where I'd be, oh, well, this makes sense. Her mom was a lot into impact. Her mom helped a lot of people out. Her dad did this. Would I see any signs that would help me understand the person you are today?
Yeah, I'm sure you would because to be very honest, I think for everyone, your upbringing frames who you are as a person or who you go on to become. And I think from a very young age, I think a question my mom always asked me every single day was, Ritika, what impact did you create today? And I feel like when I was younger, I never really understood that because I was like, how do you expect me to just create impact in a day, right? Because I think what I thought of impact as through social media, what I heard was when you're impacting 100 people at a time, 2,000 people, this and that, the big numbers. But I think she made me realize very early on that impact's not about the number, but it's more about the quality, right? Whether it be even putting a smile on one person's face in the day, that counts as impact. So I think the fact that it meant so much to her, that more than grades, more than anything else that most parents cared about, it was the impact piece that she cared most about, I think, and about being a good human. So I think it was just a combination of that upbringing combined with the exposure that I got to a lot of people. At a young age, I was actually surrounded by people quite older to me. And I actually enjoyed that company because I feel like the way I thought about things was very different from people my age. People my age were on social media, this and that. Even I'm on social media. But, I was more different in terms of how I was leveraging it as compared to others around me. So I think it was a combination of my environment coupled with my mom's specific guidance and, her nudging me into certain areas that definitely, I think, I don't think it's one moment, but I think it would be a combination of all of those different factors.
You said that growing up, you felt like you were different. I'm curious as to what do you exactly mean by that? How did you feel different and in what way?
Yeah, I think in multiple ways. I always say there's this one talk I'd given about being an outlier. I think I've been an outlier my entire life. Even today I am. And I think that's not a bad thing, right? That's a good thing because most of us are outliers. It's just the criteria that we use to define someone who's an outlier or not is what differs across, so I think it's something good because it means you're unique or you're different in certain ways, and each one of us are different in certain ways. But I think for me, the reason I say is when I was younger, instead of hanging out with people my age, I had a tendency to hang out with people I hung out a lot with my parents and their friends, as an example. I hung out a lot with career professionals or people who are running companies, etc., from a very early age. So, I was having, when people were talking about about boyfriends and girlfriends. What I was talking about more so was companies starting up. How do you start a startup? More on the business side of things. Unlike, at least, like, I come from India originally, right? So unlike a lot of the cultures in India where the girl always is involved in the home side of things, the boys are the ones that are involved in, like, the investment side, the business side of things. But I was always considered kind of like the boy of my family in a way. It's funny why they even use that term. I mean, a girl can also do everything, but they did use that term, which was to kind of emphasize how I was unlike a lot of the other people in my family, at least, and a lot of people around me, whereby I was highly involved in the business from the very beginning. I started earning from a very early age compared to the normal standards in India. Like, here in North America, it's common to start earning once you're 16, but there it's very uncommon. Like, people start earning when they're 22, as an example. I started earning way long before that. So I think that was also something different. When I came to university also, I was someone who stayed at home during Friday nights working on an assignment or working on my nonprofit or startup, and coming up with ideas versus going to a frat party, etc. So I definitely missed out on a lot of things that a lot of people may say, but I think it happened for the better. Because I think one thing I always had in mind is, if my end goal looks very different compared to everyone else around me, that is more of a reason to say I should not be doing what everyone else around me is doing. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that's what I always thought, and I still think to this day. So, like, it's 8:30 p.m. here. Most people have to get off work and go off, and some people may say, oh, you don't have work-life balance, but I think it's just me, right? Like, I just enjoy doing what I do. So I just enjoy being with my laptop, my favorite buddy. And yeah.
Yeah, Ritika, it sounds like you've already got everything figured out and you have a goal in mind and you're rushing straight to it. What is your ultimate goal and what about the goal like motivates you so much to work?
Yeah. First of all, I would say a heads up. Definitely don't have things figured out. I think it's like there may be certain components of it on certain days, which I'm like, okay, I have my day figured out today. But I think you can never have a goal figured out. And the reason I say that is because there are so many moving factors to your life, right? Overall, there's family, your health, there are professional goals, personal goals as well. And I think when all of those come together, there's something always shifting here and there. So I feel like, that's definitely not figured out. But I would say there's definitely a goal I have in mind. I don't think I could put an exact definition to what that goal is, but I think there are two, three things, right? One is definitely I want to keep impacting people. I think that is my biggest goal, is to impact as many people as I can, so that I think one thing I always think about is the day I leave this world or whatever, I do leave my footprints behind. That's very important to me. What would people say if I am to pass away today? What would people talk about me? And I think those are important things. Like, if I do pass away, like, things like, she was someone who influenced people. She was someone who created a change in people's life. Those kind of terminologies, she was a change maker. She was a visionary. Those are terminologies I want to people to recollect when they think about me. And she was someone who worked hard. That's also very important to me. So I think it's not about the end goal at the end of the day, but I think what matters to me is the process, and if people will respect me for that process. So I would say that one way. And obviously, you break that goal down and have several short-term goals coming up. And I obviously have a list of those lined up, but yeah, that would be, I think, the end goal, or at least that's how I like to think of it. And my main motivation would just be is like, coming back to my upbringing and everything, is just about impacting people, as simple as that. And sometimes it may take a different form. It may be through consulting, for example, where you're indirectly impacting a client who then works with those marginalized communities. Or maybe sometimes it's directly through my organization, the work I do, or through some of the posts that I put out, which maybe create a sense of belonging and normalcy among a few individuals. Yeah.
I know you mentioned there the importance of having a good memory when you pass away, in a sense that that's how you envision it. So the word that comes to mind for me is legacy. And that's something that's always puzzled me because I've never been quite attached to leaving an important legacy behind, because in my mind it's just, I'm dead. Who really cares at that point? And
Yeah.
I'm so curious as to see what's your reasoning behind the importance of leaving a legacy behind.
Yeah, I think it's because of my identity as well. I'm a woman of color, right? I moved to Canada 6 years ago, a foreign land, if you were to say, not knowing anyone in a way and being different from the others in terms of my accent, in terms of the way I look. So I think very early on in life, I also realized, even while I was back home in India, being a woman specifically, being a member of a certain marginalized community, that your identity or having a name for yourself becomes more important because it then inspires so many others to do certain things that you do. Yesterday I was at a talk, and one thing I said to the audience was, when I was younger, like not even born to be honest, there were some people, not my parents obviously, who had conversations that, why do you want to have a girl child? She's going to just be a burden, right? Like, you rather just drop it uh, and go ahead with it. But I think my parents didn't do that, right? And they have been so, like, supportive of me this entire time. And I think all of that to say that that privilege that I've been given to even come abroad, pursue my dreams, which almost like 600 million girls in India, out of which only 40% get the opportunity to do so. I think I feel privileged enough to be able to do that. And I think because I've gotten that opportunity, it's so important for me to set an example for those certain parents, for those certain people who have that close-minded perspective, to realize that, hey, this is what a girl can achieve if you even give her one opportunity. So I think that's why the legacy becomes important, so that there are so many other more capable people out there. I definitely no way I'm as capable, but I know there are so many people who are, and hopefully me giving a little bit visibility to women of color in certain ways and the capabilities could give them more opportunities.
I'm also wondering because you mentioned legacy and you keep on bringing up the fact that your parents supported you a lot and you get that impact from your mom and your mom's teachings.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering because even throughout, my life, I'm wondering, is what I'm doing for me or is what I'm doing for my parents? Am I living out my parents' dreams or am I living out my own dreams? And I'm wondering if you've ever been confronted with that, seeing how your mom like has a big focus on impact and then you seem to translate that as well.
Yeah, I think it's different though, right? Like, everyone pursues impact in different ways. I think if I were to go by my parents' ideal idea, that would be, I think they never even had an ideal, right? Like my mom, like for example, from a very young age, as I mentioned before, she never even emphasized on grades because she never wanted to be someone who dictates my life in any way or who
Hmm.
influences what my goals look like. But I think a simple thing she always said is, no matter what you do, how you do it, just make sure impact is at least one of the outcomes that you're creating. So I think I've just definitely picked up on that part. And like my dad actually is from the healthcare industry, so if anything, his goal would be that if I become a doctor. But I think I never felt that pressure in any way. And I think initially when I came to Canada, I came with the goal of pursuing kinesiology, right, to ultimately become a doctor, because at that point I wasn't sure what I want to do. So I just went by something my parents suggested to me. But as soon as I figured out that, hey, there are other ways of creating an impact beyond just a particular profession like becoming a doctor, that's when I started, my non-for-profit journey, my journey of coaching and career consulting international students, and they were very supportive of it. So I think that impact idea still stayed consistent. Only the way I pursued the impact was what changed. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if you have any personal stories with your non-for-profit redefined. For me, I was in a club that worked with a social enterprise that kind of did some consulting for a micro solar irrigation system in Africa, and I was able to get some hands-on things, and but it was a small company, it was a small team. I'm wondering what is different about your non-for-profit and what work do you do to empower these marginalized communities?
Yeah, I'll definitely share a personal story, but also to give the audience context is like, I think our main goal has always been, like, obviously we started about a year and a half ago, and our goal has always been to empower people from marginalized communities, specifically with a focus on BIPOC communities, right? Within Canada, that falls mostly like as international students coming in, and we also operate like in Canada, in India, in a few cities, and even in Africa, specifically in Ghana, Uganda, and Nigeria, where also a lot of work is towards empowering those underrepresented communities, or rather like communities coming from those low socioeconomic backgrounds, mainly through provision of access to education, right? And when I say education, it's not just academic, it's more so education focused on two areas. Like one is this social issue aspect of things, creating awareness, whether it be in topics like sexual and menstrual education, awareness around sexual abuse as an example, and even more broader philosophical kind of topics, such as those of like, dealing with imposter syndrome, stress, anxiety, beauty standards, because I think those are highly relevant today, especially with the target audience that we look at, ranging from 15 all the way to 25 years old. And I think like the second way is through provision of access to resources, right? Most of these resources may come in the form of like, textbooks and pens for certain communities versus menstrual products for certain communities, because they are expensive in certain areas. Unfortunately, they are expensive, whereas they should actually be free. Even in Canada, it's not made free yet. So maybe that also needs to change. But I think it's kind of like just making sure no one feels like they do not have what it takes. And I think sometimes all people need is one opportunity and one person to believe in them. And we are hoping that Redefined becomes that one person or that one organization for them. And I think a story that just comes to mind from both perspectives, from like the work that we do in Canada versus in the other areas, is I remember for a lot of the networking events that we organize for international students, we've had a lot of people come in who have just recently moved to Canada, and it's their first networking event ever in life, and they all come in full with anxiety, full with a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of cultural shock. But I think just coming in a space where they see people who look like them and people who may not even look like them but are so open to kind of giving them the space, giving them the platform to talk about themselves, their experiences, what they bring to the table, I think just has a whole another influence on them, right? And I think I've had students, some of them crying as well. I have had students who have traveled very far, like 2-hour trains, just to come and make it to the event, just to kind of push themselves out of their comfort zone, which is something we really kind of nudge them to do. And I think like in Africa, especially like the Ghana program that we did, which has been the biggest like one-time program where we catered to about 500 students actually from 5 different schools, so 100 students each, was where we run workshops on menstrual and sexual education. And we take surveys, right, at the beginning and the end. So at the end of the survey, it was interesting to see how students were like, what, I feel proud of my body. Because in Ghana, there is this idea that menstruation is considered a sin. It's as if like the devil resides in you. So a lot of like women don't actually show up to schools when they're on their periods. They miss their education, right? The parents even remove their girls from home. Because they're like, your menstrual products are too expensive to buy. So either figure it out or survive with just using cloth, as an example. So I think just being able to see the shift in their mindset and them feeling okay with their bodies, even if not very happy about their bodies yet, but at least them shifting the mindset from not being happy about it to being okay with their bodies and being like, what, this is normal. I'm not a devil just for bleeding or having the normal things going on. So I think that was the biggest impact. I wasn't in person there, but I think online, the pictures and the testimonials I saw, I think that was, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's shocking when you think that, people can't go to school because of something of natural occurrence in the human body.
Yeah.
And me and Brandon talked to someone that was in the education space a couple of days ago, and they said like there's two sides to it, right? There's the side where some people don't have access to education, they can go to school. But then there's also the other side that people don't consider that, well, what about the people that don't have adequate food? What about the people that, like in Uganda, what's happening?
Yeah.
Those people also can go to school the same way that someone should be going to school, right? So there's this whole other aspect to education as well. Something I want to ask you is, you mentioned that a couple of students that you've been interacting with have imposter syndrome. And when Brandon said you seem to have it figured out, you backtracked and said no. And why I'm sensing a sense of imposter syndrome within you is because of something that happened to me personally. And I was playing basketball, and I wanted to get on my, on the starting position on my team, and the
Yeah.
coach granted me that position. Yet I didn't feel like I deserved it because I felt like there was so many better players than me at that time. So what I did is I worked so hard to the point where I injured myself just to prove that imposter syndrome wrong. And I know that you're an extremely hard worker as well. And I'm wondering do you work so hard to prove your imposter syndrome wrong? Is that something you've ever considered?
Not really, I would say, because I feel like imposter syndrome plays out when you are questioning yourself. Self questioning and self doubt, right? There are times when I have those, but I think um, I am someone who's very confident. I think the reason I always say this to people is, and this is a reality, right? I'm definitely never the smartest person in the room. I'm definitely not the most successful person in the room. I'm definitely not the most connected person in the room. But the reason I still may get opportunities as compared to others is because of certain things that I do on a day to day basis, because of the work I put into the things that I do. So I think I know that I have that confidence because I know not even being the smartest person, I can make things work for myself. But I think, like, with what Brandon pointed out is, like, I think no one can ever have things figured out, if that makes sense. Because you can have, okay, you can say you have it figured out, but I'm sure it's not going to turn out the way you have figured it out. Because life changes, right, day to day. You never know if you are even alive the next day, to be the reality, right? So I think that's why, like, that terminology, I just be very cautious when I use it, because I feel like, especially like being in the creator space as well, when you put out so many posts and so many people are reading it, you want to be mindful of the terms you use, because sometimes those are trigger terms for a lot of people. And especially when I've worked with students also in this space who have high levels of stress and anxiety, something like figured out, getting promoted, successful can be those trigger words, because a lot of people don't have that, right? What success means to one person may not mean to other. What being figured out means to one person may not mean to someone else. So I think because of that discrepancy in the definition, I try to stay away from those terms. Let's just say that. But I think there are definitely, I'm human, so I definitely have moments where there is imposter syndrome coming through. And I think a lot of it stems from comparison at the end of the day, right? I think the day you remove comparison from your life, or instead direct comparison to more of a self comparison, whereby you compare your current self to your previous self or the future self you want to become, that's when I think the imposter syndrome, there's a lesser of a tendency for it to enter, versus when you start comparing externally. So yeah, it's definitely a lot of management of that, and it's not easy, especially being on social media. Not at all. Yeah.
So if it's not imposter syndrome, I'm wondering, is there a cost to you working so hard? Because I was reading an article the other day and it was saying that typically our talents actually come with a dark side. So I know for me is I usually uh, tend to aim very, very high. And that sometimes comes at a cost that dismissing things that are actually beneficial to me on something that I don't consider time worthy for myself. And that's cost me at times. So I'm wondering, is there a cost with your hard work or some of your talents?
Yeah, like, I think there's a cost to everything, right? You just have to balance out what's the return on investment at times and things, not just in business, but in life as well. And I think for me also, like, there's a balance I try to draw. I may not be the best at it, but I think I try my best. Is like, obviously when you're working late hours and other things, you are sacrificing the social side of things, right? You are maybe not talking to your parents every single day, which they may mind sometimes. You may not be going out with your friends every weekend, which they may mind as well. So I think because of that, I've also lost quite a few friends along the way. But to be honest, I'm also grateful for that journey, because I feel like the right people stick around, and you
Mm.
want to have the right people around you. Even yesterday, someone asked me this question that, how do you figure out the fitting in stuff? And I feel like sometimes a lot of us change our goals, or don't commit to some of our goals because we have that fear of missing out, because we have the fear of, hey, if I don't show up to this, my friends are going to be upset and I'm going to be removed from the group. Why have that group in the first place if that something as small as that could lead you to be removed from that group? So I feel like the first thing I would say to anyone is like, also is like, a piece of advice hidden in there is like, cut out people who pull you down in a way, or who are preventing you from becoming the person you are. Because I think a lot of people always get influenced. Oh, I need 10 friends, 20 friends. There's no number to it. It's quality over quantity. Even if you have just one person, but who's there as your support system, that's more than enough. And I've come to facts with that. And I think I realized it in a hard way, right? What friendship really means. So I think that is also a big component of it. I don't know if I answered your question and just moved around. I hope I did answer it.
No, no, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, Ritika. A lot of people in the world want to create impact. They want to leave behind a legacy and they want to make a positive
Yeah.
impact in the world. How does someone who have these ambitious goals create something like Redefined? what steps did you take to create your nonprofit? What actions did you do? How did you find a team? What was the process like for you?
No, definitely. And I would say, like, first thing is, like, I always say this, and a lot of people get confused when I say it. It's like, just do it. Just start with it. It's as simple, but yet as complicated as that. A lot of people said that to me, and I think initially I never understood it. But I think once you just start the process, you can do it. Like, it's like, if you, how do I say, like, a lot of, like, I don't know, on Shark Tank, if a lot of you watch it, but a lot of times founders will always ask, the investors will always ask the founders, are you working full time on this, or are you still working somewhere else? And the reason they ask that is because when you're full time into your startup, you have no backing. You don't have a plan B. So you just have to make it work, because guess what? There's no going back, kind of a thing. So I feel like, similarly, starting anything, you just have to do it. You should not have that plan B as an option in the first place. And I think the way I started with it is, what's the first step to start a nonprofit? Get it incorporated. As simple as that. Okay, how much money do I need for it? I need $200 to get it incorporated. So get it incorporated. I'm not sure what I'm going to do within the nonprofit. I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but I come up with a name on one day and I incorporated the next day. Well, the first step is done, nonprofit made. Second step, start a social media page. Not sure what I'm going to post there, but start a social media page on LinkedIn and Instagram. Okay, company is, the organization is set up. Now let's get to the work and the team. So, I think it's like one process at a time. But at the same time, I think it's like a lot of us overthink things many times, and that delays the process of execution. And I think that is the biggest difference between someone who's an entrepreneur versus someone who's more fit for working at a company. The reason I say that is because being an entrepreneur cannot be very methodical. It's something you have to just go with the flow. Like, I never had a team in the first place, but I was like, you know what, we'll figure it out when that thing comes. When it becomes important and necessary to build a team, we will figure it out. But for now, the process is just starting it out. So starting out initially, like, a lot of the initiatives I was running by myself. Then I would just post about it on social media, and then few people would come along and join. I would get my friends involved as well, provide incentives and benefits to people. And slowly, when I realized, okay, this is gaining traction, and there was more and more events that we had to organize, I knew now is the time to find a team. And what happened was, while we were doing that, networking always stayed to the core with me and my organization. It has always been the biggest part of us, networking and collaborations. You don't need to do things alone. I think that's the mistake a lot of entrepreneurs do. They're like, I want to do everything by myself. I only want my name to be out there. No, why? If there are other established organizations out there, leverage their help. Reach out to them saying, hey, you are doing some incredible work. I am here starting out right now. I would just love to learn from you and maybe work with you on a certain event. Why don't we put something together, right? Why don't we host something together? Why don't I leverage your resources and help further your name while I do the same for myself? I think it's those ideas like that that can really help kind of like get things started, and never wait for the right time. There is never a right time, technically. So I think it's just about, like, get started on whatever that get started means for you, whether it be first building a team, whether it be first getting incorporated, whatever feels right to you. I think that is something that should be done, because everyone will give you a different advice. And starting a nonprofit is similar to starting a startup, honestly. The only difference is now any funds you make, you're actually putting it back into the non-for-profit. So I think, yeah, so think like an entrepreneur when you're even planning to start your organization, and collaborate a lot and network.
And maybe that's the key, right? You said just do it. And maybe that's comes back to what we were talking about earlier is the key to not having imposter syndrome is being okay with not having it figured out.
Yeah.
And that's how you give that impression that you have things figured out. It's when you're comfortable with it not being figured out, because at the end of the day, life is so unpredictable, and I'm sure you have that mindset as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I 100% agree. There's also something that Jay Shetty once said in one of the interviews, which I really stood out to me. He said, I'm okay with not being understood. And I think that is so
Mm.
powerful, because I think a lot of us do so many things just for the sake of, okay, what is the other person thinking about me? If I do this, what will the other person think? And imposter syndrome stems from that, right? That self-doubt comes from the fact, hey, if I mess up today, will the other person not give me a job? Hey, if I mess up today, am I embarrassing myself and that other person won't want to be friends with me? It's all based on what we think others think of us. That's a bit confusing to say, but I think it's all based on that, and we determine a lot of our actions just based on that idea. So I think we should kind of shift that to just focus on ourselves and how do we think about ourselves, and not how we think someone else thinks about us. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And
And yeah, Brandon, go ahead.
oh, you can go ahead if you have a question.
Yeah, no, I completely. I was just gonna like agree with you, and I think that's the key. And we're definitely missing, I think, that message out there, and I think a lot of it has been propagated through social media. Honestly, seeing how all these successful people seems to like have it figured out, and I think what would really help is just showing that vulnerability sometimes and saying that, hey, like I don't necessarily have it like fully figured out. I'm just going with the flow and just doing it, and I'm sure as a leader, that's something that you exemplify as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's always been the key for me, right? Like, even I think my journey with LinkedIn started in the first place with the whole idea of being as authentic as I can. And what I meant by that is being my true self, which is very difficult, right? Especially when you have certain number of people looking at you every single day. But I think I make sure that that's something that stays true to me because, I come with flaws. I definitely do. I'm human, right? Not everything about me is going to appeal to certain people. Sometimes me popping up on someone's feed every single day could be annoying to some people, could be inspiring to others, could be emotional to others, right? And I think you just have to be comfortable with the fact that no one's ever going to love you or like you. Yeah. So I think it's like important to realize that. And I think one more thing I think I read from someone's podcast or I came across, I do listen to a lot of podcasts, basically in the form of reels though. Not like a full on episode, but mainly
We're gonna
a lot of the
we're
reels
gonna
because
start
it's
putting out reels for you then.
because it's so consumable, right? Like it's just so easy. It's just 30 seconds, you got the point, move on with your life. But I think someone had said that, it's important to realize you're not the main character in everyone's story. And I think that's again very powerful, right? Like, yeah, just focus on yourself because no one else is really looking at you. People are just so bothered and preoccupied with themselves, so stay true to yourself, post what you want to post, do what you want to do. And, automatically people who align with that will come around because you do not want to put in too much of an effort to attract people who don't relate with who you are true. Because the day you switch, because you cannot keep a facade on for too long, right? You will definitely come back to your true self. And the day you do that, those other extra people who were there with you for that temporary period are going to leave. So you might as well not even go through that, right? Like from the initial part, attract people who actually relate to you authentically and move with that.
Yeah. Ritika, you've dropped so many bombs of wisdom onto Adam and I'd love to keep on going. However, as the podcast is coming to an end, we'll like to get your thoughts on a quote left by the previous guest. And the quote is, "Be yourself in everything you do. Do not waver in your beliefs." What are your thoughts?
Be yourself in everything you do and do not waver in your beliefs. Yeah, I think that's true. And I think it's not just self belief, it's okay, maybe it is self belief, but I think it's also believing that others believe in you as well at times. I think a lot of us, self belief is important, 100%. But I think to be real, a lot of us are social beings, right? You cannot always self motivate yourself. We have the tendency to want to seek some form of motivation or some form of belief from others around us. So I would say, even if you may not initially have those people around you, but when you do, I think just trust that those people also trust you. Those people also believe in you. People may not say it enough, but I think just know that as well. Like, even when you're a creator or even when you're just like, just with your friends or anything, just know, like, read the unspoken. We always focus on the negative side of things, but why not take it the positive? A lot of us are like, what if it doesn't work out? What if they don't like us? But why don't we switch the mindset to what if they like us, right? What if they are rooting for us? And I think sometimes our mind influences everything else we do, right? So even if, let's say, they're not thinking that, but us just surely thinking, you know what? They believe in me as well. And I believe in myself as well. We all believe in each other. I think that's very powerful and strong. wrong, because what you project to yourself is what you project to others, and if you are someone who believes in yourself, you'll most likely believe in others around you as well, and make them likely to do the same for others. So I think it just starts with one person and then passes on to others around them. And yeah, I think it's key, because without that, I think unless you have the confidence that, hey, I can make it to the finish line, no form of therapy, no form of motivational book can help you get there, unless you yourself are willing to actually, pick yourself up and actually walk the distance or run the distance or sprint the distance, whatever it is.
Thank you so much for making it to the end of this episode. As a growing channel, it would be so amazing if you would take 1 more minute of your day to reshare this episode on any platform you're liking. Hope to see you next week.